It's February, and although it's still chilly, the days are getting longer, the birds are getting active, and best of all, the garden is really coming back to life. Hello, I'm Jane Moore, and welcome to the February STIHL Garden Guide. I'm here in my garden every month sharing my tips and tricks with you, so make sure you subscribe to the STIHL GB YouTube channel. These winter months are the powerhouse of the garden, the time when you can have a really good clear out and set about some pruning so that everything is ready for the spring. And now that the days are getting longer, it really feels like it's a hop and a skip and we'll be into the spring. So use this time to get ready. It will pay dividends, believe me. My first job is to get on with the pruning. There's a lot to do this month while the plants are still dormant, but the buds are beginning to swell a little bit, and that makes it easier to spot where to make your cuts. Prune anything and everything from wall-trained roses, apple and pear trees, including the ones that are trained against a wall or a fence, and climbers like Wisteria and clematis, and shrubs like fuchsias too. Do make the most of any nice, warmer, sunnier days for these jobs though, otherwise your fingers will freeze. Let's start with my glorious Wisteria. This is the biggest climber I have, and it always flowers beautifully, and that's because I prune it every February without fail. Wisteria needs regular pruning to keep its growth and its overall size under control, but it also improves the flowering display incredibly so. Although it seems complicated, Wisteria pruning is really quite straightforward if you follow my simple guide. Cut back any of the summer growth, any of it, all these side shoots to 2 or 3 buds. And that's it really. You might need to remove a few of these flowering spurs if they're coming out too far from the wall. And I always need to take the top of my plant down a bit to stop it interfering with next door's tiles and guttering. When it comes to pruning wall-trained roses like this one, it's a bit more difficult, especially if you've neglected it a bit like I have. I've pruned this one this week, but it's still a work in progress when it comes to the shape. But if you stick to the 3Ds, then that's a really good place to start. Remove any obvious dead, diseased or damaged wood to begin with. And then after that, you're aiming for a nice fan shape with strong stems that are tied in nicely to create an arching framework. Cut back the twiggy growth hard to stubby little laterals and think about the air and the sunshine reaching the plant. Finally, finish it off with a nice feed and a mulch of compost or manure. Roses are really greedy plants, and this will set it up for a good start in the spring. Pruning clematis like this is as easy as anything, as long as you know what time of year your plant flowers. That's absolutely crucial to getting the pruning right. If you're not sure, then keep any pruning really light and take a note of what time of year your clematis flowers. The first group are the spring bloomers like Clematis montana, and these really don't need much pruning, just to keep them within their allotted space. Wait until the last flowers have faded in late spring or early summer, and then tidy them up by cutting them back to a healthy set of buds. The trouble with these clematis is they do tend to get a bit big and rather top heavy, which is one of the reasons I don't have one in my garden. I love them, but I just don't have the space. If yours is too big, then you can be tough on old overgrown plants. It is possible to rejuvenate them by cutting the main stems very hard back, almost to the ground. But really, this is best thought of only as a last resort. I've got a couple of summer flowering clematis, but I'm going to prune the one by the shed now, as it's already starting to shoot. Summer flowering clematis fall into 2 groups, the ones that flower early in June and then again later in the summer, and the ones that flower late in the season but only once. These early bloomers just need a light prune, removing any dead or weak growth and cutting any other stems to the top pair of strong buds. tracing down from the top of the stem. The second group flower later in the summer after mid-June, and these include the lovely small-flowered clematis verticella varieties. These ones flower on new shoots produced in this growing season, so last year's growth should be removed, really somewhat ruthlessly in late February or early March. And I mean be tough, simply cut your plant back to about 30 to 45 centimetres above the ground level, close to the lowest set of good buds. While I'm here, it's high time that my bird boxes had a bit of care and attention. They need a good clean out and a bit of repair work too, so hopefully one of the little birds I've been feeding through the winter will set up home in the spring after it's had a bit of a makeover. February is the perfect time to get started on the kitchen garden. It's still a bit early for sowing direct, but there are plenty of other jobs to do, like getting your beds ready. As long as the ground isn't frozen, you can cultivate beds and start to warm up the soil by covering it with fleece, polythene or cloches in preparation for sowing in the coming weeks. If you're feeling active, this is a great time to build a raised bed now before the growing season gets underway. The really good thing about raised beds is that it gives you the opportunity to make an early start in the garden because the soil warms up just that little bit faster, and raised beds drain quickly too, so they're a great way to deal with a clay soil like mine. When it comes to planting, you can start chitting early potato varieties now. Stand them on end in a module tray or in an egg box and place them in a bright, cool, frost-free place indoors, such as a windowsill. Take a look at our previous video. There's a link in the description for more tips on chitting potatoes. This is a bed I've been planning since last year. You might remember that my herbs suffered in last winter's cold snap, and they were getting a bit big and woody anyway, so I dug them all up and planted a wildflower mix here to see me through the summer season. Now it's time to plant it properly. I'm happy to plant now as my garden is very sheltered, but you might want to wait a bit longer depending on where you are. I'm planning a bee and butterfly border of perennial plants rather than shrubs. Some I've moved from elsewhere in the garden, like these hesperus and the foxgloves too, while others I've propagated from cuttings taken back in the summer, like this penstemon. But these are all great plants for both bees and many kinds of butterflies, and those really bring my garden alive in the summer months. The key thing with bee and butterfly friendly plants is to have a long season of flowering, providing nectar and pollen galore for months. Some will go on flowering all season long. Geranium Roseanne starts flowering in June and it's often carrying on into November in my sheltered city garden. The wide open flowers are really easy for bees to spot and to land on. Verbena bonariensis starts later in the season but keeps on producing masses of little flowers. They might be small, but their tubular flowers are a great favourite of butterflies, which use their long proboscis to reach the rich nectar at the base of the tiny tube. Larger tubular flowers like penstemon and foxglove even have a little pathway highlighted for bees to land on and creep up the flower, getting dusted with pollen as they go, and then transferring that to the next flower that they land on. This little bed might not be big, but it will be a brilliant fuel station for bees and butterflies and many other creatures as well. And that means there will be a lot of wildlife activity in my little garden all summer long. I really hope you've enjoyed these gardening tips and you're all fired up to get out in your garden this February. Let me know what you're up to in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the STIHL GB YouTube channel for even more ideas for your garden. See you soon.